What you mean? I mean that whole phenomenon. I mean, I hate the fact they call it AI for one thing, because it fucking isn't, right?
Right.
It's
Plus,
not
AI is a good
intelligence. You know, it's not making decisions or anything like that. It's just a plagiarism machine. That's all it is. You know.
Oh yeah, completely. I mean, there's a difference between like the AI that we'll used to and like the AI that's happening now. I mean,
Right. It's not Skynet.
That's
You know,
good AI.
This is not Skynet, you know, we're not in like a Ghost in the Shell situation here. These are like algorithmic programs that are taking other people's work and just collating them and just coming up with like these weird composites. They're not making like actual decisions or anything like that. It's really like I wish we could just rebrand them, you know, rename it, because it is not artificial intelligence in the way that like science fiction authors or filmmakers talk about it, or the way people generally assume.
What would you call it if you could name it anything?
Oh my god, what would a good name for it be? I don't know. It's more of like a processor, isn't it? It's like an algorithmic processor than an AI. It's not sitting there and consciously thinking, right, I have been told to do this and I know of these parameters, and therefore I'm going to put this here and this here and this there. It's not doing that. It's like a derivative of marketing tools, if anything.
I think I would call it X. That's a great
name. Yeah, bloody hell, man. You know, I thought that, I sincerely, when I saw that, I thought it was somebody taking the piss. I thought it was a parody. I didn't think it was real.
Same. I think everybody thought that, because why would you do that? Why in the hell would you do that?
Why would anyone who, like, I mean, this is like the dude bro, tech bro guy who everyone hails, well, certain people hail as like this incredible futurist who's really tapped into like the digital age and whatnot. Well, I'm really sorry. Anyone who's even passingly familiar with the internet and the way companies operate on the internet just wouldn't use an X in any kind of branding at all, because of all of the association with it, you know? And the fact that there are so many companies that use the X branding, it's like you're killing your own search engine value here. Nobody's going to find what you're advertising. And it's so indistinct as well. It's so indistinct.
And not to mention that I think they changed it now, but they did have the X logo at the top left. I don't know how many times I tried to click on that to close my tab.
Yes, yeah. I never thought of that. I never thought of that, but yeah. Oh my god, I never thought of that, but yes, it's the classic Windows icon you use to close things, right?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Real dealing with a genius, folks.
I can't. I you know, for me, it's so stupid that I can't quite pass it. Something in my brain goes. No, this can't be real. This has got to be. I mean, is he fucking with us? Is he like testing the waters or something? He's like, how stupid can they believe I am? Or is he just genuinely that guy?
I feel like with him, he's genuinely that stupid. Oh. But when he gets called out enough on being that stupid, he tries to play it off like, haha, I was just pranking you.
Oh, I'm playing 4-dimensional chess here. Oh, you fell for my ruse, as it were. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's it. I think, the real geniuses are those who are in his PR outfit, right? The people who have managed to put out there that he is somehow this incredible genius and a futurist and whatnot, because he is dumb, right? He is dumb as a bag of spanners. He's like, just like beyond anything I can really articulate in terms of his incapacity. Wow. I didn't mean to start this conversation like this, but
No, it's okay for those listening who didn't get to listen to the conversation we had before we were recording. This all began due to a time zone confusion.
Yeah, which again, those of you who've listened to the Mark Allen Gunnels chat will probably be familiar with the exact situation.
So I'm still pissed, so I'm going to get into this. We agreed at 12 p.m. GMT. When I Google what time is it in Central Time at 12 p.m. GMT, it specifically Google tells me 7 a.m. Central Time.
Yeah.
And we agreed that maybe this is why you don't rely on AI, because when I woke up at like 20 till 7, you have been waiting since 6 a.m. my time, and that's really confusing to me. But as we've talked, Mill, I've come up with a different idea, possibly. Could it be that every clock in your house is wrong?
It could,
This has happened twice to you now.
Is my little place stuck in a weird kind of time warp thing, do you think? Is it like a Mandela effect thing?
It might be. Well, you might not even be on GMT time. You might just be wrong.
Oh my god! If it is that, then like every clock in this place is. Oh wow, yeah. I still like the idea that like my little place is in a time warp. So if I go out of my gate, maybe when I emerge, I'll be like an hour later.
Yeah,
that'd be cool.
I'll tell you. A while back, my whole family went back to Indiana, which is where I'm from, and my blood family's from, because my stepdaughter was doing like a baton twirling competition. It was like nationals basically. And we were staying in a town called South Bend, and my family lives in a town called Lake Station.
Yeah,
and both of those towns on Indiana. But they are on different time zones. They have an hour's difference of a time zone, and it's about an hour's drive to each town. So when I was in South Bend, each day I would go and visit my parents, and it was the most confusing week of my life because I never knew what time I was leaving any place, what time I was arriving any place. I was a victim to whatever time it happened to be when I showed up at a town.
That is brilliant. I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, obviously, the UK isn't big enough to sort of have that situation going on. But I love it. I love the fact that within that distance, you've got different time zones going on. That is fantastic.
What I agree. I think it is too, especially since I grew up in Indiana, and I had no idea until we went back for this visit that Indiana had multiple time zones. I just never left my hometown when I was a kid. I didn't know this.
I love that so much. That would if I knew that as a kid where I lived, I'd be like freaking out. It would mess with my head completely. It messes with my head now.
Because you're thinking like, oh man, what's happening in the town over? Well, it's 1 hour ahead. What have they witnessed that I haven't witnessed yet? That's only to come.
Yeah. That is freaky. I mean, there are potential like science fiction horror stories to be written from that concept. I love it to bits. Oh man. But yeah, it's a little freaky. It's a little freaky. But yeah, thank you so much, man. Thank you for agreeing to come on, and so early in the morning as well on your end.
It's okay. I'm up. I have coffee. You know what makes me up more than coffee? It's just rage, which I immediately had once I realized Google had tricked me. So I'm up.
So it's actually worked out to your benefit then. You're fueled by the rage.
Exactly. And injustice has me awake.
Awesome. Oh man, and congratulations on the store, by the way. It's looking amazing.
Oh, thank you. I am pretty happy with how it's going. Got a good supply of some George Daniel Lee in stock, so that's always nice.
That's excellent. Glad to hear it.
It's nice to have both of the front covers lined up side by side so people can see that they make one awesome illustration.
I love that so much. It's so much fun. It's a weird one. I mean, like Born in Blood, because like people, it's the reactions to it are like antipodean. It's so much fun. People either really go hard, they love it, or it's just like, oh, it's too much for me. It's too freaky,
Yeah, which is that's one of the main, I think, bonuses of going with the small press maybe is being able to publish something like that, because
Yeah,
a mainstream press wouldn't really touch something unless they could guess that it would sell well and like the
exactly.
mainstream
Yeah.
audience would like it. They wouldn't touch something, Bill. It was obvious that 50% of the audience would be like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I almost kind of wrote it with that in mind, to be honest. It's like, it's going to alienate people. This is gonna, it's probably going to piss quite a few people off, to be honest. So good. There was a part, but there was a little bolshiness about it. It's like good.
As it should.
And but I've actually really loved reading both reactions. I've loved reading both of them because like the reasons people have given for like being pissed off with it or not enjoying it have been the reasons I intended. So it's been like, yeah, excellent.
Mission
Excellent.
accomplished.
I think there was this was actually a really positive review. It was for the Ginger Nuts of Horror. The reviewer said something along the lines of Orwell said that prose should be as clear as like polished glass, and George Daniel Lee throws a brick through that window and runs away shrieking "Piss off, Grandad," which I was like, yeah, that's grand. That is such a good description of the attitude with which it was written.
What a uniquely British review that is.
Oh my god, yeah. I was wondering where they were going because it was it was a very elaborate description, and I was like, where on earth is this going?
Is pissed off granddad like a common expression? And
it's kind of like an intergenerational thing, It's almost like it's describing like the vast generational gulfs that currently exist in the UK and have probably always existed, let's be honest, but which have been like because of recent circumstances and political things that have gone on, stuff like Brexit and whatnot. There's now this thing in the UK where those generational gaps have become abysses. Like there's such a distance between older generations and younger generations. It's unbelievable. Like it kind of starts with my generation, like people like those of us who are like the older millennials and sort of like latter generation X and our parents, because our parents largely voted for Brexit, whereas we largely didn't. And most of the generations after us didn't, because we knew it would affect us very badly, which, it has. Inevitably, it has.
Yeah.
And the result of that is there is now this massive friction and tension between the generations, which I think is insurmountable. I genuinely think there's no healing that. I think it's quite profound.
It's funny. I was gonna say that the same thing happened with the U.S. with Trump, but there's a lot of young people who voted for him and still support him. So I guess it's not quite the same.
No, I mean it's interesting because it's definitely a simplification of the situation. There are plenty of younger people who did vote for Brexit under the delusion that they'd be better off as a result. But by and large, when you look at like all of the data, it's pretty profoundly skewed. So primarily, it was older generations that voted for Brexit and younger generations that didn't. And it's really fascinating because like there was also the situation that people who were in their 80s were allowed to vote on it. So people it wouldn't really affect that much, let's be honest. But people who were 16 were not. People whose whole lives would be shaped by it. So it's emphasized this incredible political inequality in our society, which is being rawly felt now. I mean, like really profoundly felt, because those people who were children, who were just coming out of high school maybe, or just doing their latter education, were emerged into an environment where it was already having effects. So jobs were harder to get, better jobs were harder to get, pay was stagnating, and so on and so forth. And quite frankly, we haven't really hit rock bottom yet. I don't think we're even anywhere near the bottom of the barrel insofar as the effects of Brexit are going. And it is resulting in these conflicts. I mean, I've actually seen, the situation in the US with regards to like Trumpism and whatnot, how families have really been like destroyed by it, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
I've seen accounts where, like, children, and quite rightly, I mean, I'd be exactly the same. I wouldn't want to speak to them either. Have basically said, look, we're not being around you while you're being like this, while you are buying into this cultish bigoted nonsense, and I'd be exactly the same. I'd be exactly the same. I wouldn't want to be near them either.
Yeah, I think it's a tough decision for anyone to make, because it's like, well, I guess do I just cut my family off?
Yeah.
To be alone? It's difficult. I don't know.
I feel really sad for those who are in a situation where they cannot make that decision, or where they are not in a decision to sort of limit contact.
Yeah.
Because it must be such a toxic situation to be in. It must be such an awful, awful situation to see this, what is effectively a kind of, it's a kind of ideological brain rot, isn't it? It's a kind of almost like a dementia that's being inculcated by media and by television, programming someone such that their personality changes, their perspectives change in such a radical way. To see that firsthand and to experience it must be the worst thing on earth.
Yeah, my dad is pretty much into all that shit, and I was pretty shocked at first. But over the years, I've kind of thought about it, and I realized, oh wait, he's always been pretty held Republican all my life.
Yeah.
Growing up, I didn't really think about it that much, but the only news channel I even thought existed was Fox News.
Wow.
Because that was always playing, but you don't really think about that as a kid. But
of course,
yeah, it's oh wait a second, he was pretty racist.
Yeah, so the only news channel you had access to was the news channel that isn't a news channel at all.
Yes, exactly. Although, when I think about it, the only time I can remember watching it was the traffic and weather reports,
right?
Because
So
it'd be on before I left for school or something.
Yeah. So the reasonably harmless parts, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so.
The reasonably benign parts.
Yeah.
But it is bonkers. I mean, we've only just started getting something like Fox News in the UK. There's this whole channel that's recently coalesced called GB News, and it is effectively Fox News for the UK, and it's formed of all the very worst people in creation. It's like a dumping ground for all of the disgraced and scandalized media personalities and politicians in our country. Basically, if they can't get work anywhere else because of the scandals and the awful bigoted racist things that they proclaim and believe, they get slots on GB News. But that's very recent. That came about I think it was in 2020 that actually coalesced. And of course, when you look into it, when you actually bother to look into it, you find that it's funded by Russian oligarchs and by billionaires and people who have a vested interest in very particular ideologies being fomented. But it is, I mean, the only saving grace about it is that it's not doing very well.
Yeah.
Were it not propped up by the billionaires and by the oligarchs and whatnot, it would have collapsed within a month of it going on air. Because it's just nonsense. I mean, it is they proclaim that, oh, we're presenting an alternative perspective that you can't air on they use that awful term woke, on the BBC and whatnot. And actually all they do is promote bullshit. Paranoid right-wing conspiracy garbage and nonsense is what they promote. And people generally understand that, it seems. They're a joke. They're an absolute joke. We have this thing in the UK. It's the children's BBC channel, and it's called CBeebies. And people call GB News GBeebies because they say it's for political infants, I mean,
I was laughing, but I had my microphone muted.
Yeah, that's.
I was too slow to unmute it. But yeah,
no problem. But I mean, the only thing, I mean, it's great that people are laughing at it, but as Fox News has demonstrated, it's actually really dangerous.
Oh yeah, it can divide the country.
Yeah, I mean, like Trump. There's no doubting that politically, Trump would not have happened without Fox News, right? He just wouldn't have
Yeah,
been an entity. Yeah.
I think it's a combo of Fox News and honestly, Facebook and
Yeah.
Twitter and so forth. Without those social media platforms, I mean, he wouldn't have made it.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, that's really scary, actually. The fact that like online, where you would hope people have the curiosity to be able to read the information they have access to. So it doesn't really take much to expose the fact that Trump is a grifting, lying fraud, right, and has been his entire life. It really doesn't take much. It's a Google search away. You can find the lists of bankruptcies and like the dummy companies that he set up, the people that he hasn't paid, and the endless lists of scandals and lawsuits that he trails behind him, the bankruptcies. It's really easy to find. It's really damn easy to find. Just as
Oh
it's
yeah,
easy to find like the people who fund him, the people who are behind him, who want him to be in power and whatnot. It's
yeah.
so easy to find. Um,
It's funny. My mom used to be a gambling addict, and I'm in
right.
Indiana. And in Indiana, we have gambling boats, so they have to
Mhm.
go like on the lake with the boat to gamble. And
Right.
the place she would go to all the time was called the Majestic.
The
And
Majestic, right.
yeah, the Majestic. So in the early 2000s, we had two boats
Mhm.
side by side. One was the Majestic, and one was the Trump.
Oh,
And
he
it
named it
wasn't
after
all
himself.
it wasn't always the Trump, but then he came to this small town in Indiana, this town that's, I mean, the majority of the population are Black Americans, and he did this huge thing. Now, I don't have the documents in front of me, so I'm only
Uh-huh.
paraphrasing, but basically, he brought in a second boat, named it the Trump, and he was able to get all these tax breaks and get all this funding because he made these promises
Uh-huh.
that all the staff would be POC and he would be doing all these great things for the
Yeah.
African Americans who lived in town, and then failed to deliver any of these promises. Within a couple of years, he filed for bankruptcy with this company and just
Hmm.
left everybody, abandoned them all, and like it was like what he basically screwed the entire town.
Yep.
So I'm not surprised. I was not surprised when he turned out to be like that with every business venture.
Yeah, and it is like that's not even like an exaggeration. That it is literally every business he's ever touched, everything he's ever set up, everything he's ever taken over, everything he's ever been involved with, like Elon actually, just like Elon, has failed. And I mean, like when I say failed, I don't even mean like failed under normal circumstances, as businesses are wont to do. It like has been catastrophically sabotaged by his venality and his lack of conscience and competence. It's amazing to think, and yet he somehow manages to con huge swathes of working class people that he would not stop to piss on if there were a fire, to vote for him, to support him. I am so made that I can't comprehend that. I can't comprehend how anyone from a working class background can think that someone like Trump, born to absolute privilege, has never had to worry about anything in his entire life, for whom like playing with people's lives, with their livelihoods and whatnot, is a game. It's just a game. It doesn't matter if he fucks over hundreds of people. Doesn't matter. To him, it will never make a dent. It will never make any difference whatsoever. How they can think he understands them or represents them or has any comprehension of their lived experience, I can't even. I just can't even.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's crazy because I mean, if they would just do any research into his history, they would know.
Mhm.
But like those fucking speeches, man, he would say things that no one else had ever said, and they were into it. He was admitting to things like, "You guys have been fucked over for all this time, and I'm here to fix things."
Mhm.
Because a lot of working class people, they have been screwed
They have been
over,
fucked over, but I mean the
especially
irony,
due to like politics and
right?
government, and
That's
he was
absolutely true.
promising something that he was just fucking
Yeah,
around with, but they bought into it
they
because
bought it. Yeah.
What
And
else?
it's like,
At a certain point, I mean, when you're living paycheck to paycheck and you can't
yep.
make ends meet, you get desperate.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's it. People have been so ground down, right, by so many administrations. And don't get me wrong, I have very little time for the Democrats either, to be perfectly honest, in their current form. Kind of in the same way that I have very little time for a lot of the parties here in the UK at the moment. But
Yeah.
my God, the sheer, it's not just the lie of that, but it's the fact that it's because of people like Trump that the working classes have been ground down and abused over so many generations and whatnot. It's because of people like him and because of the systems they sort of parasitically leech off of. And it's just incredible to me that people can't get that they can't see that. It's, mind you, I get that with, like, the current crop of grifters that you have on the internet, the flapping heads, people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
I listened to, I remember Jordan Peterson in particular. I remember like hearing about this guy that even people on the left were sort of like, oh, this guy's quite impressive. And I thought, okay, I'll have a look and see what he's got to say. And within the first video of his, the first video seminar of his that I watched, within the first 10 minutes, I stopped it and I was like exclaiming to myself, this is bullshit. This is what this guy is doing is grifting. He is talking absolute twaddle. But what he's doing is he's framing it in such a manner that it sounds clever if you don't understand the terms that he's using. So within like the first 15 minutes of this video that I watched, he used terms like postmodernism, he used terms like feminism, he used terms like Marxism, but he wasn't using them correctly. He was like conflating them together as though they all meant the same thing, and then cross-referencing them with phenomena that they might be tangentially related to, but they're not like innate to. And I was like, what are you talking about? What I mean, this is garbage. This is absolute gobbledygook. You are talking absolute rot. And then I went and found like a couple of other conversations that he's had with people and like, debates and whatnot. And I realized that this is what he does. This is his standard. This is like the nature of his grift. He hopes that the people who are like listening to him and supporting him are incurious. He hopes that they don't read, basically, because if you went away and read even like the most cursory book on postmodernism or on Marxism or on feminist theory, you'd realize that he either doesn't know what he's talking about, or he hopes you don't know what he's talking about. Either way, he's talking bullshit,
Yeah, I mean, snake oil salesmen, they never went away. They just kind of adapted to the times.
Absolutely. And the sad thing is they do really well on the internet. I mean, they do really well. I mean, people like Peterson and Shapiro and whatnot, technically they should be on the street. They should be like selling pencils on the side of the street because they are utterly, utterly disgraced. They are no good at anything they've ever tried,
I've always thought it's pretty easy to get rich now. You just have to, not have a soul.
That's exactly it. You are so right. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine, a chap named Jack Graham. We do a regular series on this channel actually called Hannibal Digested, and what we do is we take each of the episodes of Brian Fuller's Hannibal, and we do two of them per episode. We sort of dive deep into them and look at like the artistry and the symbolism of them and all that gubbins, And he's brilliant. He's a Marxist scholar, and I remember saying to him, like, if I had no morals whatsoever, if I had no scruples at all, I know exactly what I do. I know exactly what I do. I would start like maybe a new channel, a new podcast, and it would be called The Reformed Leftist or something like that. And the way it would work, it would start off really subtle. It would be along the lines of, well, I've been a part of the left my entire life, but from the inside, I'm starting to see these issues and these problems, and I would start that way, and I would gradually escalate the extremity of it, until we'd be getting into things like the support of Trump and the Republicans and like climate denialism and all of that kind, all of the standard paranoias. That's how I do it. if I've had no morals whatsoever, if I didn't care about truth or about like pumping poison into culture and into politics, if all I wanted was an audience, a platform, and money, that's what I do. And I guarantee you, within a year, I'd be doing quite well, I think.
You would be going on fucking the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yes,
Man.
that's it, right? That's it. Yes. Going on Joe Rogan, being invited to like, seminars and things, being banned from universities and using that as a platform to sort of talk about, oh, I'm being censored from my platform where I have millions of viewers.
The annoying thing with that is some pretty good Joe Rogan episodes too. It's too bad he's such a shithead. Like, have you ever watched the episode with Chuck Palahniuk? Great episode, great conversation. Great conversation, but it's like you can't talk about that because then it's like, oh, you listen to Joe Rogan? Well, sometimes, depending on the guest.
It depends on the guest. I mean, really, the only reason to listen to the podcast is for the guests, isn't it? To be honest, at this point, it's just for the guests. But Chuck Palahniuk, man, I would listen. I haven't listened to that one, but I will.
It's the best interview I've ever seen of him. It's really good.
It's just because he's such a genius, right? He's such an amazing guy.
And plus, it's just him talking for a long amount of time about stuff that he hasn't been asked about. It's
right. Yeah, I mean, he's one of those writers where, like, when I first came across his work and I read it, I was like, I just read that? I finished the book and I was like, is that as genius as like every cell in my body is telling me that it is? And then went back and read it again and I was like, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. This guy is the real deal. This guy is like, he's so incredibly smart. He's so incredibly good at what he does. And he sees so much. He sees so much.
I think like a lot of people, he was definitely my intro to transgressive fiction.
Oh, God, yeah. And that very particular kind of transgressive fiction, like towards the end of the 90s, the beginning of the 2000s, where we were, especially if you were quite young at the time, if you were like in your teens or you just moving into your 20s, where you were realizing, even if you couldn't articulate it to yourself, that something was wrong, that like there's something fundamentally broken about the cultures into which we were born and the processes, the systems through which we're being fed. People like Palahniuk, they express that in such a beautiful way. Such a beautiful way.
I would have to agree.
I mean, I always think of, the classic is obviously Fight Club. That book is incredible. The film's awesome as well. The film is absolutely stunning as well. But the book is something else. It is absolutely something else. I mean, massively misunderstood, as many works of its complexity actually are, It's that thing where, once again, you've got people largely on the right who've taken the hold of Tyler Durden and made him into a kind of icon, which he is not supposed to be. If you read the book or even if you watch the film, he is not supposed to be that.
Doesn't exist. He's imaginary.
For one thing, yeah. He's the byproduct. He's like the byproduct idealization of a very diseased mind, right? That's kind of the point. But even so, I think that book and that film they are stunning.
It's funny.
Required.
Do you know Jason Pilgin, aka David Long, who wrote John Dies at the End?
Oh my, yes.
So I've been a fan of his since I was a teen, but he recently became pretty famous on TikTok, which is surprising. He did a video recently that. Was talking about Fight Club, and he was saying things that like I kind of always knew but never exactly thought about in that way. And he was talking about how Fight Club is essentially about a cult. It's about how to begin a cult, because it's a dangerous movie about how to begin a cult, because like the most realistic movie that would be about how to run one would be a movie where the people who watch it end up liking the guy who's leading it. And that is exactly what's been done.
Yeah, I mean, that's the phenomena, right? And the reason it works so well, I think, the reason it's had that effect is because Chuck Palahniuk doesn't allow you to get away with easy answers. So, like the philosophy that Tyler Durden espouses, it begins with things that are true. It begins with observations that are accurate. So when he first starts talking to like the nameless protagonist, he says things about like, we are a generation of lost men. We don't have the narratives that our forefathers had that gave them definition, that gave them sort of like cultural purpose and whatnot and political cohesion. And he is absolutely right about that. That phenomena is a pernicious problem with postmodern culture and has been ever since we entered into the postmodern era. But then he takes it further and it keeps escalating and escalating. What Tyler Durden does is he takes that phenomena and manipulates it to turn people into his what he calls the space monkeys, right?
Right. And like any good cult, they eventually lead to having you cut ties with your family, your friends. You get isolated and you just become completely brainwashed until you begin bombing a building.
Yeah, right. I mean, funnily enough, it's exactly what we were talking about a minute ago. What Palahniuk is doing is examining the phenomena by which these movements come about, and it's exactly what we're seeing with people like Jordan Peterson and like Trump and like Ben Shapiro and whatnot, where they take advantage of actual situations, actually existing cultural situations, but manipulate them rather than providing solutions to them or trying to make them better. They only see opportunity. They see ways of manipulating them to their own ends. And that's exactly what you get in Tyler Durden. The fact that the leader of this cult, which is so persuasive in the book and the film, right? I mean, it starts to infiltrate like all strata of society. I mean, you get like, I don't know if it's true in the book, but it's certainly true in the film. You get like police officers who are in the cult, it's a demonstration of just how toxic and poisonous these movements can be.
Yeah, I know you do get those in the movie. I haven't read the book since I was a teen, so I'm having a difficult time remembering many differences.
It's a long time. I know that there are. I mean, they are. In their fundamentals, they're pretty close. They're pretty damn close. There's a few differences between. There's a few differences in Marla's story in the book, I do recall. And also, they can, I mean, obviously, Palahniuk can get away with more in the book. So the book is actually way more violent. And like the stuff that the main character goes through by the end is way more extreme. By the end of the book, he is literally unrecognizable because of the violence and the mutilation that he's kind of been through. His face is rearranged, basically, by the end of the book.
You mentioning Marla reminds me of one difference I do know. And there's a pretty cool sex scene. Yeah. And at the end of it, she says, in the book, she says, "I want to have your next abortion." Yeah. And Fox, they said, "Absolutely no way can you say this in the movie. That is the most insane, violent thing anyone could say. You have to change it." So Chuck Palahniuk, he came up with a new line, and that was, "I haven't been fucked like that since grade school," which to me is way worse. That's the line that made it.
That's okay. Right, that's all right, but you can't talk about abortions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, what? This film that is like so extreme and says such extreme things. Yeah, but you can't mention abortion. I mean, I can't help but, I can't help but think that. Sorry, go on.
To be fair, I do think when the studio saw the new line, they were like, "Okay, let's go back to the other one." But by that, it was too late.
Too late, yeah. And it's brilliant because it's actually become one of the most provocative lines in the film, right? It's certainly one that people remember. So it's like, yeah, well done with that one. You failed completely.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great line.
It is. I haven't seen it for such a long time, actually. There was a period when I watched it a lot, when it was like one of those texts that I went back to again and again and again.
Same.
I think it works on so many levels, though, doesn't it? Like certainly the film plays it beautifully. The whole, if you haven't read the book before and you don't know what the big twist is, there's so many clues. there are so many clues. The film almost outright tells you, and you just don't realize that it outright tells you. There's all that stuff about, like, when they first meet, quote unquote, on the plane.
Uh-huh.
And Edward Norton's character says to Tyler, "Oh, we have the exact same briefcase." And if you look, it is like it's not just the same make of briefcase; it is the same briefcase.
Right.
So it's like, well, yeah.
It's funny, like, once you do see it, then you watch it a bunch of more times after, just like realizing how unsettled the whole thing is.
Yeah.
It's like they'll pretty much screaming the twist.
It's so good. It's so well done. And if you don't know coming to it, it's one of those wonderful twists where once you know, it doesn't, like, that's not what the whole film hinges on. So you can experience the twist and then appreciate loads of other things about the film just as a work, because it's so well done. And in fact, it warrants another viewing or a couple of other viewings, so you can see, like, the shorthand that they're using and the little visual clues that they use all the way through the film to show you that Tyler is the same guy as Edward Norton's character. Whereas, like, a lot of films that have these big twists in them, like like M. Night Shyamalan's films, they hinge exclusively on the twists, and once you know, that's it, they're done. You can't really rewatch them. They're just, because it's done.
Sometimes you'll get a twist, and when you rewatch it, you begin picking away the logic of it because it doesn't build that way. Like, I'm pretty sure I had that issue with The Sixth Sense.
Oh yes,
I think if you rewatch it and view it as him only being a ghost, some things don't make the most sense.
They really don't. I mean, I remember seeing that as a kid, because that was one of the first. I went to see, like, the Blair Witch Project and The Sixth Sense came out in very quick succession in the UK. So the Blair Witch Project may have been the first proper horror film I went to the cinema to see, and I loved it. I loved the Blair Witch Project so much, and still do. I thought it was amazing, because I hadn't really seen a found footage horror film per se before, so it completely blew my mind. I just loved everything about it. But then we had The Sixth Sense come, like, within a month, and in the UK, for some reason, they marketed it with this quote with some awful journalist somewhere had said, "Oh, it's scarier than the Blair Witch." So me and my mates, we went to the cinema. We were so excited. Oh my God, this is going to be so good. And I remember us coming out of it and all of us looking at one another and one of us saying, "That was bullshit," and the rest of us going, yeah, it kind of was. And it's because of exactly what you said. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that he's a ghost all the way through. You see things like he's been living at home for the last year, and his wife is in the same house. I mean, the film tries to play it as though they're estranged, effectively. Like, they're still married, but they're estranged. It's not going well. But what are we supposed to believe here? That he hasn't noticed that she doesn't seem to acknowledge his existence, and she doesn't speak to him at all? Or
there's a difference between, like, ignoring somebody and just not living in the same plane of reality.
Exactly. And, like, there's, like, when he goes to visit Haley Joel Osment's character, Haley Joel Osment's mum is around, and are we to believe that, like, she's not even spoken to this guy who's turned up on her doorstep and is talking to her son? And I just no, I've never really. I'll be honest, I've never really liked Shyamalan. I just don't like his films very much. There's one or two I think are okay, that are fine, but I never got it. I remember, like, certainly here
I like
in
him.
the UK,
I like him okay.
Yeah, some of them are fine.
Films.
Some of them are fine, but, like, I never really got it. I remember, like, The Sixth Sense made a real splash here in the UK. It was really, really big. People were like, you had some of your mainstream, like, film journalists who were heralding him as, like, he's the next Hitchcock. He's brilliant. He's this luminary. He's this visionary. And I was only, like, a teenager at the time, but I was like, am I just dumb? Am I not understanding this? Are people seeing, like, a different film to me? Am I just not getting what this is about? Because I remember seeing that. I remember seeing Signs, and I thought Signs was bloody stupid as well. You've got, like, these aliens, right, who come to Earth. They're allergic to water, so they come to a planet that's like 2/3 Water.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is where I admit that I love signs.
It's yeah.
Except to be honest, I do love signs, but I don't really have much love for the end with the aliens.
Yeah.
I
The
just
twist.
love more of the acting and like the
Yeah.
family dynamic, which I find pretty cool.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's like 2/3 of a really good film, right? It's
Yeah.
like 2/3 of a really good film, and I find that's a pattern with Shyamalan. You often get like 2/3 of an excellent film where there's like tensions and there's great characters and there's like good writing, and then the twist drops, and I always find myself going like, okay, all right, fine, and then that's it. It kind of it kills the film for me, you know. It did it with The Sixth Sense. It kind of did it with Signs. It certainly did it with The Village. Like The Village was a really dumb twist. I mean, like I was so intrigued by it up until like you had that whole thing with the monster. You had that whole the setting was interesting, you know. And then it's like, oh, okay, fine, whatever, fine. Yeah. And then
I'm a
of course
big
you had
fan of Unbreakable. That's a good one.
Unbreakable's awesome. Now, Unbreakable, like, you know, Unbreakable demonstrates that, you know what, this guy, for all of the faults he has, when he puts his mind to it, he can make a great film.
Yeah.
Like a standout, amazing film with a great twist, amazing cast, and like the direction is gorgeous. It's just a great film.
He's great at directing, absolutely.
Yeah,
maybe he needs a co-writer.
I think, you know what? I think you're absolutely right. I think what happens is it's his ego, isn't it? His ego gets in the way. Whenever he's in charge of a project and there's not someone around sort of like reining him in, telling him, don't do that. Let's not do that. You get Lady in the Water, which is like one of the worst films I've ever seen. Like, bar
I blocked it from memory.
I still don't. I've watched it a couple of times and I still don't understand it. I still don't like. I don't get what he's going for. I mean, I understand certain parts of it, like the ego stuff where he's actually cast himself as the hero writer, and there's the bit where the film critic gets savaged by the hedge monster and whatnot. And like, okay, man, this is your ego on screen, isn't it? This is like you without any filter on screen, basically. But wow. And then, of course, you get stuff like The Happening, which is, well, it's
less like, said about The Happening, probably the best.
The only thing I would say for The Happening is it's so awful. It's really funny. It's really funny. Like, there are no amounts of knitted jackets that are going to make Marky Mark into a credible academic. You know, it's just not going to work, man. Put him in front of explosions or something. Have him like, you know, in The Departed where he's a cop and he's got loads of action scenes and whatnot. Do that. But don't try to sell him as an academic because it ain't going to work. It's like, and then the twist in that one. Wow.
I don't even. I saw that in the theaters, and that's it. What's the twist?
Oh, the twist. You know how you've got this phenomenon where people are like spontaneously committing suicide, basically.
It's the plants. Is that
it's the twist? It's the plants.
Oh, okay. I was thinking that was known from the beginning, but like I said, it's been a while. When did that even come out? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's a while back. But yeah, it's the plants. It's supposed to be like a, you know, it's supposed to have
2008.
Oh wow, that long ago, cripes. God, that's kind of making me feel old now. But it's supposed to be an eco message, right? That's the point of it. It's supposed to be a metaphor for like for ecology and whatnot. But it falls so flat. It falls so flat. It just doesn't work, and it's silly as well. I mean, you've got lots of sequences. You know when Marky Mark first realizes that that's what's happening, and you get all of these silly sequences where he's like, it's close-ups of him staring ominously at flowers and plants and trees and whatnot, and you're like, this, I can see what you're trying to do, man, but this is not scary. This is not working. You are never going to make a house plant into an object of horror, all right?
I mean, yeah. The only one who's ever made plants scary is Earl L. Stein and Goosebumps.
Oh my god, yeah. Oh, jeez, I love those books so much, so much. I remember like when I was a kid, and like our local library, they used to have the most amazing selection of the Goosebumps books, and they were that wonderful 1990s prints that had like, they were all really luridly colored, and the covers were made to look like they were dripping goo. You know? Oh
Yeah.
my god.
We have
just
at the bookshop we have a green rack, and on the rack it's only the classic original Goosebumps publications,
my
which
gosh.
I sell them for like $5 each, but basically I just scan eBay constantly because people will sell like big cases of like the old Goosebumps books.
Wow.
So I just buy them in bulk, and I
Yeah.
just sell them like for $5, and people love them.
Oh, I'm not surprised. They are brilliant. I love what he does. You know, where he's taking like, really classic horror and science fiction tropes, things that people will recognize, and just rejigging them a little bit to make them palatable for younger people. You know, it's just brilliant.
Truly
I remember
a
like
saint.
devouring them. That's what I remember, like getting tons of them out of the library as a kid and just not being able to stop. You know, finishing one, going on to the next one, finishing that one, going on to the next one, just like ravenous for the damn things.
Yeah, I mean, same with me.
And the fact that, I mean, it's a shame he never had the same saturation in the UK that he had in the US, which is kind of a shame. He was kind of like limited to like those bookish kids like me who liked reading anyway. You know? Which is a real pity. But I mean, he really started to get saturation when you had the Nickelodeon show, the Goosebumps TV show.
I remember that show. Pretty fucking awesome theme song.
Oh yeah, it was brilliant, wasn't it? You had that and like Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I loved Are You Afraid of the Dark? That opening sequence is really bloody scary.
It is.
Like even now, you go back and watch it, and I'm like, this was aired on like primetime kids TV. That's amazing.
Kids used to have cool stuff. I mean, I guess they still do now. I mean, let's be honest, like now, like that the kids' spooky show is Stranger Things.
Yeah, right. Wow. I mean, I'll be honest, there's been like a revolution in children's media in recent decades. It started like in the mid 2000s. You started to get these really well written, well put together shows that were aimed at children. Things like, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and you had Adventure Time a little bit later, and things like Steven Universe and whatever. And they are amazing. I remember like going and watching these things out of curiosity and realizing that these are some of the best written children's shows I've ever come across. They're so unpatronizing. They're so clever and complex, and they're dealing with really profound issues, but in a very clever, palatable way for children. And I remember thinking like, oh wow, I was a kid of the 80s, so like the 80s and the 90s really, and there wasn't much, as I love the stuff from that era, obviously, because we were kids, right? There's not much that's as good as that stuff is.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say the same with books too. Just like as far as spooky stuff goes, there's so many books for like small kids that I don't think I knew about when I was young. Like I've only discovered them because of the bookshop and like trying to stock the kids section.
Right.
But like just for teeny tiny little kids, we have books like Gustavo the Shy Ghost. I mean, it's really awesome, like spooky pictorial books now for kids that they just really blow my mind that they exist.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It is a wonderful, wonderful situation to be in. I mean, my friend Lex Jones, who's another horror writer, he wrote a children's book, which is it's a children's Lovecraft book. So it's a Lovecraftian story that has like illustrations and there's like a cute Cthulhu in it and everything, and it's really, really good. It's like
Yeah.
aimed at really young children.
Uh-huh.
But it does have like all of the elements that are in a Lovecraftian horror story. They're just rejigged to make them palatable, and it's great. It's a really
Yeah.
clever way of introducing kids to that stuff and making it so that parents are not going to get all het up about it and whatnot. They're not going to get up in arms about the fact their kid is reading a Lovecraft story.
Yeah, we've stocked a bunch of kid books that are just retelling classical stuff, like there's a Dracula one, a Frankenstein one. My favorite though is it's a Poe one, and it's hold on one sec, I need to Google the name because I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, it's called Edgar Allan Poe and the Treehouse of Usher. Pretty great.
The Treehouse of Usher. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. What a great idea.
Uh-huh.
So is it like the Fall of the House of Usher, but for kids? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly so.
Brilliant. Oh, what a great idea. And there's so much you could do with that, right? If you could take each of the each of the Edgar Allan Poe stories and just subtly rejig them.
Yeah, they have a bunch of them. They have one for the Raven. They have one called Edgar Allan Poe Needs to Sleep, and I don't know if that's just like if that's taking any content from one of his stories, or they've just written something original. I haven't read it.
It could be the Telltale Heart, couldn't it? That could actually be the Telltale Heart, because that's insomnia is a big part of that one. So maybe. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Because like there is a long and storied tradition of horror stories for kids. I remember when I was and I mean like really young. This was probably in the mid to late 80s, so a long time ago. There was an imprint here, the Ladybird books, and the Ladybird books were like these really, really small hardbound books that were beautifully illustrated. Everything was hand painted. I mean, they are gorgeous, and they would do things like condensations of Greek myth and fairy tales for children, effectively. And one of the imprints they did was Ladybird horror. So they took like Victorian horror stories. They did Frankenstein. They did the Dracula. They did the Mummy. They did the Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And they are just condensations of the original books for children. But I remember having the Frankenstein one and the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde one. And although they are condensations for kids, they're not that much. They are actually really close to the original books. Like really damn close. A lot of them, the nastiest stuff is actually in these books and even portrayed in the artwork and whatnot. I remember like the Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in particular is absolutely brilliant. If you can find like some copies of that on eBay, the Ladybird Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's so good. It's so good. The artwork is really scary. Like really
keep
scary.
An eye out for these.
Well worth a look. Well worth a look. And they were brilliant gateways into that kind of fiction, because they were just like simplistic enough for kids to be able to read themselves, but just enough into the horror where they would get a thrill out of it. There was a sense about them that was slightly forbidden, maybe. There was something about them where you were like, oh, I maybe shouldn't be reading this,
Oh, yeah, I get that.
Big draw, right? That's a massive draw.
Well, that's why, like, so many people got into Stephen King as a kid, right? It's because they had that sense of, should I be reading this?
Absolutely. I mean, like, and it was big in like the 80s and the 90s, wasn't it? Because you were still in that horror boom that Stephen King kind of started, almost by himself, where every bookshelf was just laden with horror, right? You had, it was Stephen King, and it was Ramsey Campbell had his resurgence. Then Lovecraft had a resurgence in that era. People like Dean Koontz, obviously, Clive Barker, obviously, so many people. So we had access to it. It was just there. I mean, I remember even our school library, like when I was at high school, even they had copies of Stephen King. You would sometimes be asked, you would be asked, are you sure you can be reading this? And you're like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. I think for me, it was just my mom had Stephen King. So we just had those books all around the house. So it was pretty easy just to read any of them that I wanted to.
Same here. Same here. I mean, my mom is like probably one of the biggest Stephen King fans I've ever met in my life. She would go nuts if she could like speak to him or something like that. She would go absolutely insane. She's got so many like special editions of his books and whatnot. And it's exactly the same. Like she would tell, I mean, we would talk about the books we were reading when I was kids. That was one of the things we used to do. We'd go to the library, we'd get out tons of different books and we'd tell one another about them. And that's kind of how I started reading her horror books. She would tell me about things like, I remember her describing to me The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist, and thinking, oh my God, that sounds amazing. And that may have actually been one of the first proper horror stories I ever read.
Wow. I think mine, at least with Stephen King, was probably The Body in Different Seasons because of Stand By Me. I had seen the movie and someone told me it was also a book, so I sought it out.
God, that's such a good one to start with as well. What a story.
Yeah, I remember not completely loving it as a kid, but eventually I grew to love it. I think I was a little confused by in the novella, there's a long section where we just read like sections of a story the one kid's writing.
Yes.
And I think I was thrown off a bit. Like, well, what is this? This isn't in the movie.
Sort of like story within a story thing.
Yeah. But it's good. It's a great one.
And also, it's a very adult story, that one as well, isn't it? Like, it doesn't have like the stuff that a kid would probably latch onto as strongly as some of the others, like the monsters or the ghosts or anything like that. It's very human, that story.
Yeah, I mean, I think I just liked it because it was about kids doing cool stuff, and like I'm a kid, maybe I'll find a dead body. That'd be cool.
It's so funny. I was talking to my friend Kit Power about this, so I do loads of podcasts with and whatnot. He's also just how Barker is to me, King is to him effectively. King is the reason rights and whatnot. And we did a podcast about it. We talked about when the new film came out. We talked about the film, the 1990s adaptation, and the book all in one. And he was saying that even though King is writing about like a US centric experience of childhood, and even like an era specific concept of childhood, he's so good at it. He's so like sincere and brilliant at it that even like a kid in the UK who has obviously a removed experience of childhood understands it and feels that it's sincere, that it's like part of their childhood too. So when he describes things like the Barrens in it, it's like, I remember places like that when you were a kid, where you would go and you would meet with your friends, and it was like slightly out of the way. It was like off the beaten track. It was your place. It was where you would meet and you would have your little sanctum, and stuff like that. That experience of being a child. I think he writes children brilliantly for the most part. King.
Agreed. And I think that's. I've talked about this before, but I think because of that is how he's still like the most popular writer of all time, I think, because unlike a lot of writers, people begin reading him when they were kids because I think of his ability to write children so well, and so that he sinks his things into you pretty early on.
Yeah, and that's it, right? You're done. I mean, it's weird. If you're a kid of like the 80s or the 90s, you almost couldn't avoid it. He was so like everywhere, wasn't he? Like Stephen King was really like the Michael Jackson of literature at that point. He was everywhere. Like
I mean, he
not
still
just
has that changed? I think he
no,
still
probably
is.
not. He still is, isn't he? Yeah,
I mean,
let's be
still, if you go
honest.
into any bookstore, even
Yeah,
if they don't have a little section, they will have Stephen King
yeah.
stocked.
And it's not just like one or two examples. If you go into a bookstore, they'll have everything. They'll have
Yeah,
everything that's like publishable at the moment. It will be there. He's a phenomena in and of himself, isn't he? I mean, I don't think there's probably been a writer in history as consistent as that, who has
yeah.
produced so much of such quality and which has been so universally appealing to people.
Right. And this, I don't think it's going to change. I mean, he's been really lucky with film adaptations throughout his whole
Yeah.
career. I mean, I didn't like it, but the most recent adaptation of It, the 2017 one,
Oh yeah.
that's the highest grossing Hulu movie of all time.
I know. I was shocked by that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I liked the first one. I was a bit. The second one, I think, really dropped the ball. I think the second
Yeah.
one's a bit of a mess, to be honest. I think the second
Well,
one's
I love
problematic.
I love the book. I just
Mhm.
don't think it's a book that can be made into a movie. People
I
keep
th-
trying,
yeah,
and the
I
way the
think you're
book is
right.
written, it isn't adaptable.
No,
You
I
would
think you're
have
right.
to, if you had to, I think, maybe do it like how they did it in the 90s, like as a
Mhm.
miniseries. But
Yeah,
even then, why? I mean,
yeah.
the plot is so well known at this point,
Hmm.
you can't surprise anyone unless you just completely change it up at this point.
Yeah, you're right. It's become like a myth in and of itself, isn't it? You know, people who've never actually read the book or seen the films know who Pennywise is, and they know like the symbolism, the imagery in they know about the clown in the storm drain and all of that stuff. They get
Oh,
that.
yeah, the fortune cookie and so forth. Like, there's nothing new that you can do with it.
No, you're
And
right. You're right. And it's a shame because like there are things in the new film I like. There are things I like in it. Like I think like most of the child actors are great. They're really, really good. But when it hits, it's the same problem in the book, funnily enough. It's when you get the adults turning up. The adult characters are just not as interesting as the kids.
agreed, yeah, if only it stayed with the kids only, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, if only, right? And the film, like the films are the new film's really weird. It does that first of all, it does that thing of splitting it in half. So you've got like the first film which is about the kids, and that works reasonably well. And then you've got the second film which is about the adults, and it feels like it doesn't really know what it wants to do.
Yeah, it makes me wonder how I would like it if someone like edited both movies together to go the flow more like the book. It might be an improvement.
That would be a really interesting way of doing. I'd love to see it. Yeah, I'd love to see it be a massive film, but I'd love to see that. To see if it fixes some of the problems that the second film has. I mean, for me, I had a real problem with it almost from the outset because like the 1990s adaptation, for all of its faults, it does one thing really quite right, which is it cuts out the Adrian Mellon thing. You know, the
Yeah.
assault on the gay guy at the beginning of the book, which is the thing that brings back Pennywise in the modern era. In the book, it's really horrific. I mean, it's brilliant. It's actually one of the best scenes in the book. It's really awful. I mean, it's just hideous. It's so
It's a
brilliantly
great
done.
scene. Yeah.
The film the second film starts with that. It starts with that sequence, and it's brutal, and it's actually really well done. It's very unpleasant and it's really nasty. And when I remember going to see it at the cinema, and I was sitting there thinking, oh wow, is this how the film is going to be? Are they going to change the tone up? Are they going to make this like way more adult and dark and unpleasant? And then in the next sequence, and in fact every sequence following, almost all of the horror is undercut by these really terrible jokes and like visual gags and punchlines. And my problem with it was, look, if you're going to do the Adrian Mellon thing, you need to make it pay. You need to make it work. It needs to be in context with the rest of the film. But this is giving me tonal whiplash. You can't move from something as awful as the Adrian Mellon sequence and then into like, oh, silly horror comedy gags. You know, that undercuts it completely.
Yeah, it shows that the filmmaker doesn't understand the book.
Yeah. I think you're probably right there. I think you've got, it just doesn't, tonally for me, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I think they should have stuck with the tone they hit in the Adrian Mellon sequence, where it's like pure, brutal, bloody adult horror, and it's things that adults are scared of. It just didn't work for me. I'd have been happy if they'd done what the 1990s film did and just not did it, just cut it out, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, if you can't commit, don't even tease us.
Exactly, don't do it. And there was also that weird thing, the queer baiting thing that they had going on in it, where you had like Richie suddenly like turning out to be gay. And
I don't remember that. I only saw the movie once, and I thought this sucks.
It's really weird. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's clear that idea hadn't even occurred to them in the previous film. It's so clear that wasn't part of the previous film. So there's no continuity. There's no, like, it feels like baiting. It doesn't feel sincere, and it doesn't do anything for the rest of the film. It doesn't pay off. So it felt like really pandering and really like, look, if you're going to do it, go for it. Yeah. Let him be gay. Let him be gay. If you're going to do it, let him be that character. But they don't. They kind of hum and haw about it, and it's like a nothing. It's something just synthetically thrown in, and I really reacted against that. I really didn't like it. If you're going to do it, go for it. Yeah, be sincere about it. Make it part of the story. Given like that this version of the story is set in the 1980s, right? Well, think about what was happening in the 1980s. All of like the homophobic rhetoric that was in culture and society. You had the Reagan administration, you had the AIDS epidemic, all of that stuff going on that you could have woven into this story about Pennywise and about his relationship to Derry, and all that could have been so cool. You could have done so much with that and said so much about like the homophobia of the era. Pennywise could have been like part of that, certainly in Derry. Like, that's the kind of negative ethos that he feeds off of, right? But they don't. It's just like,
yes, Pennywise would love that shit.
Right. But they don't go anywhere with it. It's really strange. And when you realize that that's kind of what they're doing, you're sort of like, what? I'm sorry, but that doesn't work. That doesn't make sense at all. And it really like left me with a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, if I'm perfectly honest. When I came out of it, I felt like it was paying lip service, rather than making like a sincere or genuine comment. And that's, given like, as you well know, the explosion in queer horror lately. I don't understand why you'd be so coy about it. I don't understand why.
I can't remember this at all. I mean,
yeah, right. I mean that says it all, doesn't it? Really, if you can't even remember it, it can't have been that impactful. It can't have been that meaningful. It's such a weird thing, especially in context with the first film where there's none of this. There's not even a suggestion.
If they production companies or whatever read too many Rotten Tomato reviews and saw people going, what if he was gay? So they thought, oh, great idea, let's do that next time.
Oh yeah, let's do that, right? It's so weird. It's the insincerity that gets me. That's what I really react against. It just doesn't feel right to me. It feels like, I don't know, it just feels like misrepresentation rather than representation, And like I said, because like even when that film was being shot, you were getting this like explosion in queer horror and queer sci-fi and queer fantasy. I mean, that ball is still rolling, right? There's so much of it out there now, and it's all so good. It's so good, I mean, now we've got Eric LaRocca and we've got Paula Dash, and they're awesome. Hailey Piper, these guys are awesome. I mean, I've been reading a lot of this stuff, obviously, lately, and I'm in awe, I'll be honest. The stuff that's coming out at the moment, it's stuff I've never really read before. I read Paula Dash's short story collection, We Are Here to Hurt Each Other.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's a great collection.
God almighty, I was knocked on my ass by that collection, I'll be honest. I read it and I was like, this is. I can feel like the legacy of Barker here, but this is like the evolution of it. This is like where it should be going, right? This is like, it's like, you can feel like this is the kind of thing that Barker probably would have liked to have sired, you know?
Right.
It's awesome stuff.
It makes sense that she was recently included on that Hellraiser release, along with someone else on this podcast.
yeah, of course. No, it was wonderful. Honestly, I've been like that. We were asked not to mention it until the pre-orders came up, and I tell you what, I was biting my tongue for the longest time. I was, oh my god, I so want to talk about this. I so want to talk about this.
Have you already talked about it on the podcast yet?
No, not yet. Not properly.
Maybe you should, you should tell people. What are we talking about?
Absolutely, yeah. Let's go for. Well, as Max said, like I was my pal Kit and we were contacted by a chap named Neil Snowden who works for Arrow Films, and what Neil does is he sorts out all of like the DVD extras. What Arrow Films produce are these and I mean like amazing bespoke specialist Blu-ray sets of horror films and horror franchises and science fiction films. And because like DVDs and like physical media is now becoming like rarer, these are collector's items. They're very expensive, but they are the very best physical media you will ever get. They're beautiful. They come with like artwork, and they come with hundreds of hours of extras on their DVDs. And unbeknownst to me, Neil listens to some of our podcasts. He actually listens to some of the podcasts that I do with Kit and whatnot, and this podcast. And he got in touch with us. He got in touch with us out of the blue, and he said, look, on the back of the new Hellraiser film, we are going to be re-releasing this. We're going to be releasing this big new Hellraiser box set that's got the first 3 films in it, and it's going to have tons of extras on it. And given that you guys have, you speak about Barker a lot and you speak about Hellraiser quite a lot, would you like to come and be part of it? And of course, like our initial reaction was just, yes, please. That'd be great. We were just dumbfounded. We were just incredulous. We couldn't quite believe it, And a little while earlier in this year, they shipped us off to Hereford, little town here in the UK, like a cultural centre in the UK. And Kit and I met up for the first time, like in person. We've been doing podcasts for like 6 years, but we've never really had a chance to meet up properly. So we met up, had an evening, we had a night like just chatting and like talking to the guy who was going to be directing us, Jonathan, and what it was going to consist of, and it was fantastic. It was absolutely amazing. I probably had too many gin and tonics, more than I should have, considering that we were going to be recording the next day. And the next day they took us to this this beautiful little independent cinema in Hereford that's also got this big bar in it. So it's almost like a cinema cum nightclub where they do nighttime airings of horror films and pulp sci-fi and all this stuff. It is absolutely incredible, and you can have a drink while you're there. So it's really, really cool. And we got to see the new print of Hellraiser 2 on the big screen. And I've never seen Hellraiser on the big screen before. I've never seen any of the Hellraiser films on the big screen before. So it was an experience. I have never experienced anything quite like it, to be honest. Kit and I came out and we were buzzing. We were it was like we'd had drugs or something. We were so high. It was unbelievable. And then Jonathan set up this little recording place, like this set that was way more elaborate than anything I'd ever expected, because I thought this is going to be a DVD extra, right? So all they're really going to do, they're going to sit us maybe in they're going to sit us up at a table. There's going to be a recorder in between us, maybe a laptop or something like that, and that's going to be it. It's not going to be anything that elaborate. But no, there was proper lighting, and they mic'd us up and everything. And he spent ages setting up this set that we could sit at that looked beautiful. And the result was this conversation between Kit and I about Hellbound and about Hellraiser and about Barker and all the stuff that's influenced us, where we come from effectively. That's about an hour and a half long. And it was fantastic. The whole experience was just wonderful. I mean, Kit and I were a little bit apprehensive because, it was a different format, right? We've never done this before. We've only ever done this stuff online before, so we didn't know if it would work quite as well face to face, or with an audience like there listening to us.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. It actually worked really well. And when we were done, Jonathan came up to us and he said, "You know what? Normally we have to edit these things to the nth degree, but we're not going to bother with this one. It's just going to be as it is on the DVD. So you will be able to find us in fact, it's up for pre-order now, but on the Arrow Films Blu-ray special production of Hellraiser, specifically Hellraiser 2 Hellbound. Kit and I are on an extra on the DVD, which is called Hell is What They Wanted.
Wow. That's really awesome, man. It feels like a dream come true for you. I'm super happy for you. That's awesome.
Honestly. And to think as well, I mean, I did not know until a little later that Eric LaRocca and Paula Dash were also on it too. They've also had a similar experience, so they're also on it. That is brilliant. To me, it's like, I don't know, it's like all of the descendants of Barker come together in one area, right?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, I was blown away by looking at everyone included in this release. It's crazy.
It is absolutely insane. And don't you, I mean, Neil said to us, who gathered us all together, he said to us, there's been loads of Hellraiser DVD sets down the generations, and they tend to just recycle the same material. It's the same footage from the 1980s, the original filmings. It's interviews with people who were directly involved with Hellraiser, which are all on this DVD set, by the way. So all of that stuff is there. But what they wanted was something new. They wanted to see where Hellraiser sat with in the present day horror, with present day viewers and audiences and whatnot. So that's why they got us involved.
All right. How long have you been keeping this a secret?
A while. They shipped us to Hereford in it was about 4 months ago. So a while.
Wow.
I've just been sat on it and just wanting because all the other guys I podcast with, the guy I mentioned earlier, Jack, he loves Hellbound. Hellbound is one of his favorite films. And so I've been like, oh my God, I so want to tell you. I so want to discuss this with you, but I couldn't, I just couldn't. It was one of those things. I didn't want to ruin it,
I would have told everybody.
Yeah, right.
I am terrible at keeping secrets.
Normally, so am I. I normally am, but I did manage to keep it stum I'm quite proud of myself in that regard. I'm quite proud. But it was a massive relief when I got home from work yesterday and saw that everyone else involved was tweeting about it, and it was all up over Facebook, and I was like, oh, thank God. Oh, thank God for that. I can actually start talking about it now. But it was the best experience, honestly. The whole thing was so much fun. Getting to meet Kit for the first time, and we got on like a house on fire. Kit is just a diamond. Kit is an amazing guy, brilliant writer as well. I mean, a lot of his work has been nominated for British Fantasy Awards and whatnot. He's a genuinely brilliant writer. But we got on like a house on fire. We just really, really connected, and that was really nice. The whole thing, we just had a blast. They put us up in this because we stayed for just one night, but they put us up in this really old hotel in the middle of Hereford. And this hotel, we were reading about the history of it. It's called the Green Dragon, and there's been an inn on that site since the 1700s. And
wow,
I know, right? The hotel in World War II, it was used as a bunker for American soldiers who'd come over, and there are tunnels that still go under the hotel that are designed to lead to escape routes from the town in case the town got bombed during the Blitz. I mean, how cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
the hotel itself is really old. Like, they've done it up a little bit, to make it livable, to make it habitable, but it's still essentially a Victorian hotel. So it doesn't have things like aircon or central heating or anything like that. It doesn't have Wi-Fi or anything like that. It's old, man. It's really old. And you won't believe this, but you know what room they put me up in? Room 217. I got there and I got my room key and I was like, no fucking way. No fucking way. That's a joke. Someone's done this deliberately, surely. But I got in touch with Neil. He's like, no, that's just the room they gave you, man.
You freak.
Yeah, right. That's just the room they gave you. And I was like, this is like,
guy is completely disgusted. Like, no, it's just a rip. Leave me alone.
Yeah, right. The whole experience was just the loveliest thing. It just went so well, and everything was just so well done. I mean, we did say to them, if you'd like us to do any other DVDs, commentaries or anything, just let us know. We are in.
Anytime.
Anytime.
Any movie you want us to do, It Chapter 2, we will do it. You want us to do Lady End of the Waddle, we will not do that one. Anything else?
There are limits. There are limits. Maybe Lady in the Water I might draw a line on, but yeah.
So I have an update for you that I need to get into about the time zones.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So it turns out you, my friend, were giving out bad information.
Oh no!
And I am baffled at this.
Uh-huh.
You are not on GMT right now.
Oh,
you
no.
are now on BST, and the Seminole Time in the UK is considered British Seminole Time.
You are right. You are right. I am so sorry.
That's the issue.
Oh, Max, man, I am so sorry. You are right. You are absolutely right. It's British summertime. Of course it bloody is.
Yeah. So
my God.
Going forward with every other guest, don't say GMT unless it's in the winter time, I guess.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. You are right. It's due to turn reasonably soon. Yeah, you are right. My God.
That's it. That's it.
So you know how I've put on this front of being incredibly erudite and smart throughout this? Yeah, it's a complete front. I am an idiot.
Wait to drop this bombshell until after you said a bunch of cool stuff.
Brilliant. Oh, Max, man. Well, I tell you what, I'm so sorry, and thank you, man. Thank you so much. I am so sorry I'm such an idiot.
Oh no, it's fine. I had a blast. This was great.
Honestly,
I mean, I was the one who had to wait extra. You did, so I mean, apologize.
Right.
Nothing changed with me.
Oh man, I can't believe I did that. I honestly can't. I'm like incredulous that I did that. Oh well. But no, man, it has been an absolute blast catching. As always, it's been an absolute blast. Before we go, is there anything you'd like to pimp out?
Oh yeah, definitely. My new magazine, Ghoulish Tales, is out now. You can pick that up. Coming soon, we have through Ghoulish Books a book called "The Only Safe Place Left Is the Jilk" by Rowan Wagner. It's about an HIV positive gay man trying to find medication in the zombie apocalypse. It's pretty bleak.
I loved the cover reveal. The cover is so brilliant, really provocative, like with the pink triangle and everything. Yeah, really good stuff.
Really tying into those ACT UP posters from the 1980s. The guy who did that, his name's Aiden. He's actually the author's boyfriend, and he's just. I think this is the first schedule he did, but it's amazing.
Really? God, it's so good.
I might be wrong. I might be wrong on that, but. This is amazing. I don't know if he's done a Kevil before this.
That is incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's it.
Oh, yeah, okay, no problem. No problem.
Any other info, people can go to theGhoulishBooks.com and find out more about us. You can go to fuckmaxbooth.com to find out some info. It's a great website.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
People are going to remember that one. Links to all of this below, by the way, guys. So if you do want to visit any of these, down below, yeah. As for myself, same as usual. You can find me knocking about here on the Exaggerated Elegy channel. You can also find me over at Our Lives in Horror, which this video is also going to be up on. In terms of my published work, you can find links to it over at strangeplaygrounds.com, including the Born in Blood volumes, which Max was so kind to publish through his Perpetual Motion Machine publications, which is now Ghoulish, of course. Oh, and also, obviously, if you go to the Arrow Films website, which I will also leave links to below, you can pre-order the aforementioned Hellraiser set, which myself and loads of other lovely people feature on. And if you fancy chatting, you can currently come and chat to me over on Twitter at Enigmatic Elegy. I don't know how long that's going to last, so we'll see about that one.
Yeah, I've just stopped promoting my social media accounts because nothing's filming it anymore.
Yeah, right. It's who knows, right? I'm not going to call it X, by the way, guys. It's Twitter, all right. Thank you so much, Max, man. That was an absolute blast. Loved it.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem at all. And until next time, guys. Bye-bye.